Now, when you want to go beyond the default post loops in Elementor on WordPress, you're going to need the right tools to create your vision. In this video, I have 4 of the best tools for WordPress and Elementor to do just that. Now, I'll show you how each one of these works so you can see which you think is the right fit for you and the job in which you're trying to work. Well, my name is Paul C and this is WPTuts, the channel that helps you create more unique and dynamic WordPress websites. Okay, so let's hop over now onto the computer and take a look at our first candidate. So we're going to kick this comparison off with Jet Engine. Now, Jet Engine is part of the Crocker-Block suite, but you can use it as a standalone plugin and you can use it to work alongside Jet Engine itself to create custom fields and custom post types and so on, or you can use it in conjunction with advanced custom fields. However, we can just use it to create simple custom listings. So what I'm going to do is come over to the dashboard, and from there, with Jet Engine installed, we need to come down and choose the option for listings. Now, listings, as you can see, I've already created a few different types of listings. And what we're kind of doing is we're creating that initial template design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in to add new. Now from there, we have some options we've got to choose. So you can see it says, what's the source for the listing? In other words, where do you want to pull the data from? So we have options for posts, terms, users, and repeater fields. We're going to keep this super simple and say posts. Next up, from post type. So if you created a custom post type, you'll have additional options in here to the standard WordPress defaults. If we click to expand that, you can see posts, pages, and media are your typical WordPress post types. Then we've also got things like forms, smart filters, and properties. These are more custom things or things that have been installed as part of a plugin. And then we've got My Templates, which is part of Elementor Pro. So what we're going to do is we're going to just choose properties because I've created this custom post type and the process is exactly the same no matter what kind of post type you choose. So we choose properties. We're going to give this listing a name and we're just going to call this loop test. And then from there, we've the final option, which is the listing view. In other words, what tool do we want to use to create our listings and how are we going to use it moving forward? Click to expand that. If you have Elementor installed, you can use Elementor. However, if you wanted to use Gutenberg's blocks, you could do that as well. However, we're going to stick to Elementor for all of this comparison. So we'll choose Elementor. So we've set up the basics now. We can say create listing item, and that will then create a listing item setup ready for us to use Elementor to create it. Now, when you want to work with this, because we're using the custom post type of properties, then what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down until we get to the dynamic options that are part of the listing options or the listing element. So you can see we've got dynamic field, dynamic image, dynamic link, and so on. You don't have to use these. If you chose a normal post type, you could, if you wanted to, use the normal dynamic widgets. You know, things like your title, your post excerpt, those kinds of things. For maximum compatibility, we're going to stick to these listing elements. So the first thing we're going to do is just pull in the image, the featured image for this particular property, drag and drop that onto our page. You can see that now pulls in a placeholder image. And if we take a look at the left-hand side, we've got the source, and this is where we can pick where we want to grab our data from. So you can see post thumbnail is the default because we've dropped in there an image, which just considers the fact that we're probably going to be using the featured image. So there's a nice little time-saving feature there. But you can, if you want to click from there, and you can see we have some additional options. You've got post thumbnail. User avatar works only for user listings and pages, so it's not going to work in this example. Or we have options. So we click on there, we'd have options to choose from, and you can see we can also put custom repeater fields in. So custom fields. Let's put that back to thumbnail. So if you wanted to use a custom meta field or a repeater key meta field, you could drop those inside there. So you have a nice level of integration into the dynamic content side of things when you're working with these dynamic widgets as part of Jet Engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to medium because we don't want this to be absolutely massive. However, let's just go for medium large, just give a bit more scope on there. Now you have to remember, whenever you're creating these kinds of loop layouts, you are probably going to be working with a smaller section. So in other words, we're not going to be working with a full width layout. You may be, but chances are you probably won't be if you're working with an archive or something like that. But you have complete control over how you want to set this up and how you want to size it, style it, and all those kinds of things. Moving on down, we can link this image. We can click to link it. Then we can choose what source we want. So if you're using this on an archive page, it makes sense to have the image to be a link. As you can see, permalink is the default option. That would be the permalink to, in this example, the property. However, if it's a post or a page, it would go over to the permalink for the relevant type of post. You can click to expand that out and you can see we have additional options inside there for the link source. So you may not want to use the permalink, you may want to create a custom link field and then you may want to reference that. So this could be an external link, it could be anything you want, video link, those kinds of things. So you can choose different link sources. And again, you can reference custom meta fields or repeater keys. So if you created a custom meta field, you could link it inside there. Then you just got some basic things like how you want to deal with the link. Is it going to be opened in a new window? So an external link, you may want to say yes, and so on and so forth. Alignment, well, pretty self-explanatory. One of the nice things we have though when working with Jet Engine and the Jet Engine listings is we have some conditional logic inside here. So if we didn't have a featured image loaded into a particular post or page, you could specify that you want to hide this if it's empty. You could also obviously set things up to be, required fields to avoid that problem. And you could also drop in a fallback image if you wanted to. We then have a full list of styling options, advanced, those kinds of things you'd expect to see as part of Elementor. Let's come back into this and we're just going to scroll down again and we're going to grab some dynamic content. So we're going to say dynamic field, we'll drag and drop that into there. And you can see now we get some different context-based information, all working along the same lines. So you have a lot of control over the data, the type of data, and also how you want to format and output that data. This is the kind of thing you don't have in a lot of the other options when you're creating these custom listings or loop items. So you can see the source is post term user and object. We can open that up and we can choose from metadata options or relations hierarchy. So if you're dealing with relationships, you could do that inside here as well. So we're going to leave that set to post term user, blah, 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 because this is the title of this particular property. And once you choose this option, you can see the object field underneath allows you to pick from, again, another range of predefined objects. So things like titles, dates, content, excerpts, and so on. So you can format this in a ton of different ways. Want to add an icon? You can do that. Want to wrap it in different HTML tags? You can do that. So we'll say this is going to be a H3, for example, and then whatever stylings have been associated with H3 will pull into that. Again, you've got the hide if value is empty, a fallback option, but then we have some additional features that are very, very useful and powerful. We've got the filter field output that allows us to control how the data is going to be output. And then finally, the customize field output, which allows us to add extra things in there, HTML code, things like that. So filtering the field output, if we click to expand that, you can see we have callback options. If we click, you can see, and unfortunately you can't see this down the bottom of the screen, but there are a ton of different options. So let's just say you drop something in here and it was a link and you wanted to make it a link. Well, you could specify just by using this and it would say, it will create a link from there. You can format dates, you can format numbers. There's a ton of different things. So that's a pretty powerful feature that you have as part of Jet Engine. I'll disable that for now though, because we are just dealing with title text. Then we've got the customized field output. If we open that up, we just get a very, very simple box, which we can then see we've got this little short code that denotes this title that's going to be used. But we could put anything before it, after it. We can even use HTML inside here as well. So we'll just say property name. And there you go. We now have that added in at the beginning of it. You can put it at the end. You can do a lot of different things with this. And again, you've got all your styling and your advanced options. Let's take a look at one more option inside here. Now we'll come back in, we'll scroll down again, and we'll say we want to grab some dynamic meta, for example. Let's drop that underneath. And you can see that pulls in the date, the author, and the comments. However, we can expand that and we can choose any of those options inside there. We can drop icons in, we can drop prefixes in, we can add items, we can make them inline or list items. You have a ton of options, and then underneath that you've got formatting options for each of those different settings. So date settings, for example, you can choose the format you want. You can set that up to be a link and where you want that link to go. Author settings, comment settings, and so on. So you can get pretty creative with how you want to drop data inside here, just using the dynamic fields that are part of Jet Engine. Now, before we move on to actually creating the final listing output, there's one other thing I want to show you that is quite useful. If we come down to the settings option in the bottom left-hand corner, because we're working with Jet Engine, we have another entry called listing settings. Click to open that up, and we can now choose the listing source. So you can see posts, and we can choose terms, users, repeat fields like we did at the beginning when we created this. The from post type, and again, we could change that from there if we wanted to. But we also have the preview width. So we could say, well, if we're working with a 3 wide grid on a 1400 pixel wide layout, then you could say that you wanted to use a specific value, allowing for space around the outside edge and so on. And then you can set this up to whatever value you want. So let's just say about 450, somewhere around there. And then we can see what this would look like, and we can make sure then that any formatting we have is all going to work perfectly. So you can see we have a problem at the moment with this title. Let's click on that, come into our style, for example. We can just change the typography on there. We'll make that a little smaller, something like that. We'll just set the weight on it. And what we can do then is we can adjust the line height to make sure that everything works. Okay, so let's bump that up in size, adjust our line height to make sure that when we overlap on the next line, everything is going to look good. So you can see we can adjust and tweak this, and it's just quite a useful little setup. So once we're finished with that, we can simply hit publish, and then we've created that listing element, that listing item. So with that done, the next thing we need to do is create the page and drop in the listing widget, so we can set this up and choose what listing item we want to create our archive pages, listing pages, and so on. Now that we've created our individual listing item, we now need to create the listing that outputs the data. So you could, like I say, if you wanted to, you could use this with your archive templates. You can use it with standard pages. However you want to work with it. Anything that works with Elementor, you can pull this data in. So for this example, we're going to keep this super simple. I'm just going to create a page or use a page. We'll edit this with Elementor. And once we've done that, we're going to pull in the listing widget. So we're just going to search for listing. And you can see this is one of the dedicated Jet Engine widgets. So we're going to drag and drop that onto our page. We'll drop in a little bit of padding at the top and bottom just so we can allow a bit of space around this. Okay, there we go. So at the moment it says there's no listings to show. That's because we haven't told it what template we want to use or anything else. So at the top you can see we have listing and it says select. Open that up and this will show all of the listings that we've created. So you can see there's the previous ones that I'd set up inside here, but the one we've just now configured is the loop test. So once I select that, you can see that now pulls in the data using that template that we've just created. So if we went back and edit that listing template, these updates or these changes will be updated and reflected inside here because we're adjusting that template file. So once we drop this in, you can see it immediately pulls in all the data using the styling that we've configured on there. We then have a lot more options now on the left-hand side on how we want to deal with this specific listing. We can adjust the columns. So we could set this to 2, for example, and you can see that because we've set up a flexible structure, even though we set a value for that width when we were designing things and we used the settings option, that's just there for a visual representation. It doesn't make any difference to the final output. It's just there so you can get a gauge on how things are going to look. So that's pretty cool. We'll set that back to 3. You could then set this as an archive template if you wanted to. We can adjust the status so we can control exactly what types of content will be displayed on here. So you can see we can click and open that up. We can have published, future, draft, pending review, and so on. We then have the post number, which is the overall number of posts that will be displayed based upon the column. So in other words, we've got 3 by 3 because you set the post to 6. If we set that to be 5, you can see we'll have 3 by 2 and so on. We then have the no found message, so you can configure this. Is a masonry grid, so if you have different scale images, you could handle that by setting this to be a masonry grid. You could also in turn force this to have equal column heights to make sure that everything looks good. Load more if you want to load more, so you don't have that sort of, or you could have infinite scrolling kind of effects and those kind of things, or you could say load more, and that'll put a button at the bottom if you have more to load through. And you see you've got the load more element ID and so on. Custom post types, there's a ton of options inside here. And if you'd like me to cover this in a lot more detail, then let me know in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to take a look at creating more detailed content on this. But what you also have underneath then, which again is unique to the Jet Engine plugin, is you can query things. You can query based upon posts, terms, users. So you can query all this data that gets pulled up. So if we open that up, you can see get terms of posts from, and we can select where we want to use those, what terms we want to select our post from. So if you're using terms for any of your custom post types or your normal posts, you could filter based upon that. And again, you can order things, you can order descending, ascending, and so on, include, exclude, hide items, a ton of things. We have widget visibility, so you can see hide widget if. In other words, do you want to set a parameter on here? If it's met, it will be hidden. If not, it will show it. You can see it says hide widget if, and it says always show. Or we can say the query is empty, so it'll hide it. it's up to you. Just some nice, simple conditional logic you can apply. And finally, if you wanted to, you could convert this into a slider. So we can say enable slider, and now we have a nice, clean, simple slider configured for us, which we could then go through and configure any of the settings, the styling, and all those kinds of things. So straight out of the box, Jet Engine has a ton of really useful, really powerful features when you want to work with listings, if you want to work with dynamic data, all those kinds of things. The cool thing is you don't even need to be using Jet Engine to create your custom data. If you are using custom data, you could easily use custom post type UI and advanced custom fields if you're more used to those, and then you could just use Jet Engine to do the design aspect of things and output your data. There's lots of options, lots of different things you can do with this. So that's the Jet Engine way of working. Let's now move on to the second option, which we're going to take a look at. So next up on our list is Elementor Custom Skin. There's a free version of this and a pro version of this. I've got the pro version installed, but I'm only going to be using the free version to do exactly what we're doing here. So the pro version has a couple of extra features in there, but you don't realistically need those. They're just some of those things that are quite nice to have if you want to have just a simpler way of working with some different aspects. Okay, so we're going to come back over into our WordPress site. Now, the way we do this with Elementor Custom Skin is a little different to what we did with Jet Engine. For this example, I'm already set up some advanced custom fields and a custom post type or two. So we're going to use those as the basis of creating our loop. And that's the difference, is when it comes to Elementor Custom Skin or Ele Custom Skin, it's referred to as a loop as opposed to Jet Engine, which refers to it as a listing. So once you've installed the Elementor Custom Skin and you come into the template and the theme builder section of Elementor Pro, you'll see we have an option called loop. Click on there, and any loops that I've already created will now be listed inside here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same as before. We're going to create a new loop. So we're going to say add new. You can see we have simpler options this time. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this test loop. And we'll say create template. And once you do that, that'll open up Elementor like it did before. Now we're going to take through first of all to the blocks library, the template library and so on. Well, there's nothing inside there we want to work with, so we're going to close that down. Now, what we have now is we have no special widgets that we can use that's part of Elementor Custom Skin. We're only going to use the normal Elementor Pro widgets. So if we take a look, we have single on the left-hand side because this is effectively going to work in a similar kind of fashion to a single post template, if that makes sense. So what we can do is we can do like we did before. This time we're going to put in the featured image from this section, and you can see that will drag and drop the featured image in. Now at the moment it doesn't know where that featured image is coming from, and as you can see it's pulled in a picture of Bert, my little dog. But we don't want that. We want the custom post type of vehicles. So how do I get about that problem? What we're going to do is we're going to come down to the settings in the bottom left hand corner, click on there and choose the preview settings. Click to open that up. It says preview dynamic content as. So we're going to select that from there and we're going to come down to vehicle. So we're going to click on there. It says what vehicle or vehicles do you want to take a look at? So at the moment it says all, but we're just going to type in something I know is going to be in there. No, maybe not then. So we'll just type in a letter. Okay, there we go. We'll say this Mini JC Black Edition. So we've got the vehicle as custom post type. There's the post we're going to use for this demonstration purposes. Hit apply and preview. And we should find then that will pull in the featured image for that particular vehicle, our custom post type. So there we go. That's the first thing done. That takes us back in now. So what we can do is we can drag and drop in any of these widget items. So we can say we want the post title. We'll drop that underneath there. And you can see there's our Mini JC Black Edition. We can come back over. We can say we want to drop in a different widget this time. So we're going to say this time we're going to pull in the post info. We'll drop that underneath there. And like we had when we dealt with Jet Engine, you've got metadata, author, date, comments, those kinds of things. But these are the native Elementor Pro options. So we can click to open that up and all the normal options we have are inside there, including the ability to pull in dynamic data for any of these kinds of things if we wanted to use that. So let's just say we don't want comments on there. We can just click to get rid of it. Okay, so that's pretty simple and straightforward. What we'd also do though is we can come back to this and we can say we want to put something custom inside here. We don't want to rely upon these options that we have available. We want to put something else in. So this time we're going to come over and we're going to say we're going to pull in the text editor and drop that underneath there. This will just put in some predefined text. We're going to click on the dynamic tags option. Now, if you're not used to dynamic tags when it comes to Elementor Pro, I'll put a link in the description for a video that'll tell you exactly how these all work and the benefits of using them. Now, when you install Elementor Custom Skin, it adds in an extra widget into the dynamic tags. And we're going to use that right now. So we're going to click to open up the dynamic tags option. And the new option we have is post summary, which is going to take the main content from our post and allow us to configure exactly how many words we want to pull in. So this is a nice way of just piquing people's interest and then letting them click to read more. So we're going to click the option for post summary, and you can see that pulls in some filler data for me. If I want to, I can click on this little wrench icon next to post summary, and from there I can configure things like how many words that I want to use. So let's just say we wanted to set this to 30. You can see when we do that, it'll update and show us 30 words. Advanced, we've got the option before, after, and fallback. So all the normal things you'd expect to see. So we've created our basic layout, but at the moment, none of this is selected to be able to go through and take a look at the individual vehicle. To do that, we need to manually configure this. So we're going to click on this image. What we're going to do is we're going to set that to have a link. So you can see it says link is set to none. I'm going to click on there, and we're going to say we want to set this to a custom URL. Once we've done that, that'll open up the new option. So if we wanted to put in a manual URL, we could do that, which obviously is not going to work in this example. So what we can do is we can click on this dynamic tags option again, click on there, and what we can do is we can say we want to use that post URL, which is the permalink for this specific vehicle. If you wanted to, you could use a post custom field. If you created a custom field as part of your meta field setup, your custom field setup for these vehicles, then you could put that in there and you could link that through. So we're reliant upon working with the default Elementor Pro features in this instance, whereas Jet Engine gave us a lot more control over how we could do things with a lot of its own built-in native features. So on that front, it is more powerful, but it could be a little overkill for what you're trying to do. And there are many other plugins that allow you to do various different things just using Elementor. Okay, so we're going to say post URL. If we wanted to configure anything else on there, we can click on the link option, so we can set this to open in a new window, much the same as we could do with Jet Engine, add no follow and so on. So with all those things done and in place, we can just hit publish. This will then allow us to add a condition to it. And with the more recent versions of Elementor Custom Skin, you can start to use conditions as part of it. So if you wanted to use conditions to work with your loop items, you can do. For now, I have no need to do that. So we're just going to say save and close. And we've then created our custom loop item. We can come out of this now, we can go back and start to drop this into our page. So let's take a look at how we do that next. I created a new page and opened up Elementor, ready for us to start dropping in our actual layout. To do this, we're going to choose the posts option. Now we can use the posts option, even on an archive page, we can use the posts option because we can customize various different aspects of it. And again, in the same way as Jet Engine, you can use this tool on pages, posts, archives, any kind of thing you want to. It depends on just what your purpose is with it. If we chose the archive option though, you couldn't pull in the custom design that we've created, the custom loop item. We have to use the posts widget for that. So let's just drag and drop this onto our page. Again, like we did before, let's just make a little bit of space above and below. So we'll drop in 50 above, 50 below. And again, like before, you can see this has now started to pull in some sample data, what it thinks is the correct data. Obviously, in this example, it isn't the correct data, so we need to deal with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to come first of all down to the query option. So we're going to choose query, and from there we're going to say our source is not posts. We want to use this setup for vehicles. Once we do that, you can see that now we'll pull in vehicles. But what you also notice is that this is using the default layout. This is not the one that we've just created. So let's see how we put that into place. Come back over to the Layouts tab, and you can see at the moment it says Skin is set to Classic. Now, if you've used the Posts widget before, you'll probably switch between Classic, Cards, and Full Content. But we have a fourth option now with Elementor Custom Skin installed, which is Custom. Click on there, and that opens up a new section inside our layout options. First thing and most important thing is select the template we want to use. So just click and open that up. Any of the templates that we create, the loop templates we've created, will be listed in here, much the same as the listings were listed inside Jet Engine. We're going to choose test loop, which is the one I've just created. Once you do that, you can see that now pulls in the data using our design. Now underneath this, you can see we have a series of different sort of switches. Now these are to do with the Pro version. So I'm not going to touch any of those, but you can see what they do is they mimic some of the options we have inside Jet Engine. So we can choose masonry, we can set things up to be the same height, or we can show them in the slider. If you need those features and you want to work with Elementor Custom Skin, you're going to have to grab yourself the Pro version to get access to those very useful features. But like I say, I'm going to leave those as they are. We're going to ignore those completely. Underneath though, you can see we have columns in exactly the same way as we had with Jet Engine. And again, we can change those to whatever we want. We can also adjust the post count, the posts per page. You can see we can set that to 6. We can set that to any value we want. So set that back to 3. So everything is set up inside there. Let's take a quick look at the other options now that are available to us working in this way. Query, as I just shown you, allows us to specify the source, but we can also include by various different parameters. We can sort them by their date, by the past day, month, so on. All those kinds of things. Now the advanced query options, you can ignore that. That's a separate plugin that's not included by default as normal. You're only going to get these normal options by here. If you want to exclude certain things, you could do that, and you can easily configure things to output exactly what you want. Finally, we have pagination. So if we had 12 records, for example, setting this to 6, you can see there's no way of taking a look at the next 6 items and so on. All you need to do is just enable the pagination, and you can set up whatever you want to do there. So you can set things up to be the page limits, you can shorten the links, you can set previous labels, alignment, and so on and so forth. So at the moment, you can't see anything because all the vehicles I've got are inside there. But obviously, if we had more over there, we'd see those pagination options. So that's how we would use this alongside the built-in functions as part of Elementor Pro to create our custom listings using Elementor Custom Skin. So that's the second option we want to take a look at. Let's move on now to the next one. Next plugin we're going to take a look at is dynamic content for Elementor. Now I've referred to this as the Swiss Army knives of working with ACF and dynamic content and so on. And this kind of technique is no exception. Let me just show you what I mean. I'm going to come over into the dashboard. We're in the templates in the Save Templates section. What we're going to do is we're going to say we want to add a new section in. And we're just going to say Add New. We're just going to call this Dynamic. And I'm going to call this Ooh. And you'll know why. So we'll say, and we'll put loop at the end just so I know what I'm talking about. Create our template. So what we know is we're going to use then the normal Elementor tools. We're going to close out of this library. And now we're going to start creating the layout. Now you can build your layout in any kind of way that you want. You're not limited to creating it, what I've shown you in this video, what I'll show you this time. I'm just using that for consistency. You could do horizontal versions, you could do vertical versions. It's up to you. You can get as creative as you really want to. Now, let's just minimize these different panels just so we can see a little better, because there are a lot of panels to do with dynamic content for Elementor, and I mean a lot of options. Now, you don't need to use the dynamic content for Elementor widgets. You could, if you wanted to, use the normal Elementor Pro widgets, and you could tie in the dynamic tags from there. It's up to you. However, if you use the dynamic content for Elementor widgets, you're going to have a lot more native functionality built in. So let's take a look at what we have. You can see we've got a ton of different options here. But what we are interested in is this dynamic content post section. These are all the sort of widgets that are associated with post information like titles, user fields, content, featured images, and so on. So first thing we're going to do, like we've done before, is drag and drop in the featured image. We can choose the image size. We're going to set this to be medium large like we've done before, and we'll set it to be centered. We'll set it to link to the post URL. Now, once you've done that, you can see nothing is showing up inside there. So what we need to do is come down to the settings section, and underneath the preview settings, we're going to click, like we've done before, we're just going to change this over now to know exactly what data we want to work with, which is going to be vehicles. And like before, we're just going to type in mini, and we'll use that JC Black Edition, and we'll say apply and preview. We'll let that refresh, and there you go. There's our mini all ready for us. So this is the first part. Next up, we'll just put in the title and drag and drop that underneath. Nothing too untoward there. You can see it's exactly the same as we'd expect. You have some additional options that are specific to the widgets that are part of dynamic content for Elementor, but I'm not going to go over those when we're dealing with things like this. It's all pretty self-explanatory, pretty basic stuff, to be honest. So we'll do the post metas again. We'll drag and drop that inside there. We're going to change this over now. We're going to get rid of what's in there, and we're just going to do a search for price. There you go, vehicle price. So you can see that now pulls in some dynamic content. Now this is an advanced custom fields field, so it's a custom meta field. And as you can see, we can reference that very easily. We can apply multiple post metas if we want to have more than one. We have a ton of different options we can work with. So we can expand that out, choose the filter occurrences like I showed you earlier on, jump into render mode, for example, and we can just do whatever we want in there. So at the moment it's set to auto, and 28,000 means nothing to anybody. Let's just change that over now to something else, and we're going to come down and we're going to just choose custom. Now that gives us a normal text box, so we could just reference the data inside here, and you can see it just says a meta value. So we're going to put in the currency symbol at the beginning of that. We'll just put in the pound sign there, and you can see that'll update and show us 26,000. We can just put price if we want to in there. We could format this. You know, we could do whatever we want inside here because it's basically just a text area. So you can quickly and easily start to customize those kinds of things. You can pull in dynamic data if you want to, dynamic tags. Again, you've got options for your empty field metadata and so on. You can really go to town with what you can do here, but I want to keep things fairly simple and straightforward. So let's just publish this, and we'll say we've now created the layout that we want for our individual vehicle. Now we're going to go take a look at how we assign this to our template or our page or post like we've done before. The dynamic content for Elementor treats this as a view. So if we do a search for views, you'll see we have a dedicated widget specifically for that. We'll drag and drop that into our design, and again, like you can see before, it pulls in the default data that it thinks is the right information, which isn't always the case. It's going to default to the posts. So we need to change that over to specify the right query to show exactly what we want. To do that, all we need to do is come to the From tab and change that from being posts, and we'll change this over to vehicles. We can also do things like set the status, whether we want to ignore sticky posts. There's a ton of different things you can do inside here. We'll take a look at that in a moment. Come back out of there though. At the moment, this is using the default layout. So we need to change this over to use our template. To do that, we're going to come into select, and we have three options. We've got fields, which will just give us all the field names. We have text, and you can see we have template. Now, this is probably the more complex out of all of the four we're going to take a look at in this comparison video. But what you have is you can use it in its simpler form if you want to, which is perfectly fine. But if you want to get in and create more unique, more in-depth, more detailed, more functional kinds of layouts, then you can do that by using some of the other massive array of features that this has. We're going to keep this really, really simple though. So we're going to choose the template option. Then we need to choose what template we want to use. So I'm just going to type in the name, and then we'll select that. So you can see there's our custom template all set up. The only thing we need to do now, specify how many columns we want to work in. Now this works differently. It's not a simple clean interface where you just choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to come into the skin option. Render as grid is fine, but we're going to set the column width. So we're going to just change that over to 33%. And you see once we do that, we'll now get our 3x3 grid layout. So everything is set up inside there. You do have multiple options for the render though. You can choose grid, you could choose table if you wanted to, and you could have a table set up. You can just choose list, and that'll give you a list view. So you can see it's a bulleted list, which you could then format, or an ordered list. You know, there's lots of different options. You can even choose a slideshow if you wanted to. And then you can configure that however you want. So if you wanted to have, for example, navigation with arrows and dots, you can do that. We now get arrows and dots to be able to move around our section. So let's put that back to grid, leave it as it is. You have, like I say, lots and lots of different options. So you can filter criteria. If you want to set up custom filters on here, you can set custom filters up. You can group them by meta fields. You can group them by various different items. So you may want to group all of your BMW based cars together, all your Ford based cars, all of your Audi based cars together. This is just scratching the surface of what can be done with this particular plugin. But like I say, it is a more complex plugin, a lot more detail involved in it to get probably what you'd get with the other plugins we're going to take a look at today. But if you want to go beyond those, this is probably going to be the answer for you. Next on our list is extras for Elementor. Now, I've had this plugin for quite some time, but I haven't actually got around to testing it out any real kind of sort of way. So if you'd like to see more on this, if this piques your interest, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll take a look at seeing if I can come up with things that I think are going to be worthwhile in checking this out. I know there are a couple of features that are coming out in the next version, which I think is 2.3, that will have a big impact for a lot of people. So keep an eye on the channel. Let me know if you want to see more about this particular plugin. But now we're going to take a look at how we use this to create those custom post listings. So we're going to jump back over into our dashboard for WordPress. We're into the template section again, but this time I'm into save templates. So this is something that is part of the free version of Elementor, because what we're going to do is we're going to create a section template. So we're going to just create that layout like we've done previously, but we're going to do it slightly differently this time. So we're going to cut a section, and from there we're just going to say add new. Section is fine, and we're just going to call this loop test 2 just to make sure. Create our template. And once we do that, we then go into Elementor. We can close this down. We don't need predefined blocks. And now we're ready to start building the template we want to use. Now, we have no special widgets that we're going to use for this. You can see if we scroll on through, we do have a lot extra widgets for Elementor. We have a ton of different things inside there, but nothing that we want to use to reference for creating this particular layout. Again, we're going to go back to using just the normal Elementor Pro options. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say we're going to grab an image to start off with. We'll drag and drop that in there. This is again where we're going to use those dynamic tags. So we're going to click on dynamic tags option and set this to be the featured image. That will then pull in the featured image. And sometimes you don't necessarily get to see exactly what's going on. Some plugins have this kind of weird thing where it doesn't show you. What we're going to do is we're going to come down to the settings again, come into our preview settings, change this over, and we want the vehicle as an option. And then we're going to click and we're just going to type in mini again in there. And we'll say the mini JC Black edition and hit apply preview. And there we go. That now just pulls in the image for us. So we've got our featured image inside there, which we can now adjust this in any way we want to. We can set the image size. Let's go for medium large on there. If you want to, you can come into the featured image and you can drop a fallback in there if you want to. This is part of working with those dynamic tags. It's quite useful. So come back over, and this time we're going to drag and drop a heading in there. Now you can use, if we do a search for post, you can see we do have post title. We could drag and drop that down underneath, and that will pull in the name of this particular vehicle. We could come back over, we can come back into our widgets, and we can just drop something else. If we do post again, we can see we've got things like post info. Drag and drop that underneath there. And again, you can see it pulls in those same metadata, so we can get rid of the comment section. So, you can build this up however you want to. You can pull in dynamic data, like we've done with the featured image. You can set these up, pull in any data you want. So, for example, you may want to pull in some dynamic content from your ACF custom field. Well, we could do just that. So let's come back out. Let's add a new item inside here. We'll change this over to terms. And from the taxonomy, we're going to just choose the manufacturer. And you can see that will pull in, this example, BMW. So we can use these and pull in dynamic data and set these up in any kind of way that we want to. We'll hit publish on this now. So we say we've finished with our template. We're happy with that. So the template is created. Next thing we need to do now, like we've done before, is create the page or the archive template or whatever we want to use to reference these loops, and then set that up. So the newly created page, Elementor's open. We're going to do a search for post. And you'll see we've got this post extras, which is part of the Elementor extras widgets. So we're going to drag and drop that into our page design. And again, you can see it just pulls in what it thinks is the right data. So we can come down, we can query this if we want to, and change this from posts and set this to be vehicles. And then we get the right data in there. But this is using their predefined layout in the same way as the posts widget as part of Elementor Pro does. We can change that though. We can come back out to our layout. And we have the skin, again, like you see, we've got classic inside there, but we have carousel now as well, much the same as we had with Jet Engine and the Pro version of Elementor Custom Skin and so on. But what we're interested in is the post skin. You can see it says default, but we want to change this to template. Choose template. The next thing it says is, please choose the template you want to use. So we're going to click on there, and we've called this test 2. So you just type in test. There's our loop test 2. I'm going to click on that. And once we're done, there we go. That's pulled in our data and laid everything out for us. Again, like I say, we can always go back to that template, edit things to make sure everything looks fine. Obviously, the text looks a bit big. It looks a bit messy at the moment. But the demonstration on how to use it as opposed to how to configure the design and so on. So all the same things are here. We've got the columns. We've got the posts per page. We can change the grid layout if we want to. We can set this to be default like it is right now. Or we can set it to be masonry if we had different aspect ratios and so on for our images. Set that back to default. We can adjust our spacing, so our column spacing if we want to. You can see we can bump that up. We can drop it down nice and tight. Same with the row spacing. So we can adjust this to get exactly what we want inside there. We can also adjust the vertical align, which can be quite useful depending upon the layout that you have. So you can set things to be top, middle, and you can see that will adjust things based upon the overall height of each one of these individual template setups. We've got horizontal, you've got vertical alignment. We can adjust these any way we see fit. Query, we've already seen that, and that works in exactly the same way as it does inside Elementor. What we do have in here, though, is filters. And this is one of those things that can be quite useful. If we enable the filters, if you've ever used the portfolio setup or the galleries, for example, as part of Elementor Pro, you'll know you can filter things based upon taxonomies and those kinds of things. Well, we can do the same with this. At the moment it says taxonomy is categories, but we want to change that. We're going to change this to manufacturers, which is one of our custom taxonomies associated with our custom post type of vehicles. Click on that. You can see that now pulls in all of the different taxonomies, the vehicle manufacturer taxonomies, and puts those at the top. We can now click and we can filter our data based upon those filters at the top. So that's pretty nice. And we've got things like we can exclude terms, we can set a default term if we want to, we can order ascending, show the post count, show the all filter. If we want to hide that, it'll only show then the manufacturers. You can set this up however you want to work with it. We could set an infinite scroll if we want to, so instead of having pagination, you could have this when you get to the bottom of the page or close to the bottom, it'll keep on loading in more vehicles, more posts, whatever you kind of have in there, one after the other. Alternatively, you can set pagination like you did when we had, using the posts option as part of WordPress, a part of Elementor Pro. And again, we've got the option to configure this and, set things up. There's a lot more options inside here. Advanced just basically gives us a message if it doesn't find any data inside there. So that's how we can use Elementor extras and how we can set things up inside there to create our custom loops and also do things like apply filters, infinite scroll, those kinds of quite cool things. Now that you've seen the 4 plugins in action, which one was your favorite? Are you using one of these already? If you are, let me know which one you're using and if you kind of think this would make you consider swapping to an alternative. I'd love to get your feedback. Drop those comments and questions in the comments section below. As always, all of the applicable links for everything I've covered in this video are in the description below. My name's been Paul C. This has been WPTuts, and until next time, take care.